On my birthday, my son-in-law mocked. "Wish yourself a nursing home, old man." Everyone loudly applauded, laughing at me. I politely smiled without saying a word. But betrayal won't go unpunished. I bought his company for $10 million and fired him in front of everyone. He fainted from shock, and I regained my dignity. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. The champagne cork popped, and everyone in the private dining room of Fleming's Steakhouse raised their glasses. I forced a smile as my daughter Kate and her husband Brendan stood at the head of the table, surrounded by their friends, 5 polished couples in their 30s who probably couldn't tell me apart from the furniture. "To Frank," Brendan announced, his voice carrying that particular tone he reserved for performances. 67 years young. I nodded, accepting the chorus of "Happy Birthday" that followed. The ribeye in front of me was perfect, medium rare, just how I liked it, but suddenly tasted like cardboard. Maybe it was the way Brendan kept checking his phone between courses, or how Kate barely looked at me all evening. 3 glasses of Cabernet later, Brendan stood again. This time his smile had an edge. "You know what, Frank?" He swirled his wine, letting the silence build. "I think it's time for some real talk. Some honest advice for your next chapter." Kate touched his arm, but he shrugged her off. "Frank, buddy, and I mean this with love, you should start looking at retirement communities. Seriously." He paused for effect, his eyes glittering. "Wish yourself a nursing home, old man. Time to admit you're not needed here anymore." The table erupted in laughter, not polite chuckles, genuine belly-deep laughter. Brendan's colleague from TechVantage Solutions slapped the table. One of Kate's friends covered her mouth, shoulders shaking. I felt my face freeze in what I hoped passed for a smile. My fingers tightened around the stem of my wine glass, and I caught myself before it shattered. Kate's eyes met mine for half a second before she looked down at her plate. Her cheeks were flushed. From wine or embarrassment, I couldn't tell. But she didn't speak, didn't defend me, didn't even frown. When she glanced at Brendan, something passed between them. A look, quick but unmistakable. Relief? Satisfaction. Whatever it was made my chest constrict. "Come on, Frank, don't look so serious." Brendan clapped me on the shoulder hard enough to make me flinch. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You're still living in that guest house on your daughter's property. Might be time to consider your options, right?" "Your daughter's property?" The words hit like a physical blow. The property I'd transferred to Kate 3 years ago when she married this peacock. The 4,800-square-foot main house where they lived, while I occupied the 800-square-foot guest cottage out back. All perfectly reasonable, I'd thought at the time. Keep things in the family. Stay close to my daughter after losing my wife. "Right, Frank," Brendan pressed, still grinning. "Right," I heard myself say. The word came out steady, almost pleasant. 35 years at Merrill Lynch had taught me how to keep my face neutral when the market crashed around me. The rest of dinner blurred, more wine, more laughter. Kate's friend Jennifer asked about my hobbies, with the careful tone people use when talking to nursing home residents. I mentioned restoring my '67 Mustang, and she said, "That's nice," before turning back to her husband. By the time dessert arrived, I'd become invisible again. The conversation flowed around me. TechVantage's upcoming product launch, vacation plans to Cabo, someone's kitchen renovation. I sat there, 67 years old, at my own birthday dinner, as relevant as a houseplant. When Brendan excused himself to take a call, investor stuff, you know how it is. I watched Kate, really watched her. She was laughing at something Jennifer said, her hand resting on the table where Brendan had been sitting. Her wedding ring caught the light. 3 carats, platinum. Brendan had made sure everyone knew it cost $40,000. The ring I'd given my wife had been 1 carat. We'd been married 42 years. Kate didn't look at me once during those 10 minutes. Not once. The valet brought my car around at 10:30. A 2019 Camry, practical, reliable, invisible. Like me. Brendan and Kate had a Tesla Model X, also $40-something thousand, also mentioned frequently. I drove the 12 miles back to Westlake Drive in silence. The main house blazed with lights. Kate and Brendan wouldn't be home for hours yet. They had an after-party planned at someone's place downtown. I hadn't been invited. The guest house sat dark at the back of the property, separated from the main residence by a manicured lawn and a privacy hedge. 800 square feet, one bedroom, one bath, a kitchenette, and a small living area. Everything I owned fit comfortably inside. Everything I owned. I sat in the car for a moment, staring at the main house through the windshield. My house, the one I'd bought in 1991 for $375,000, now worth $2.4 million, according to the Zillow estimate Kate had shown me last month. Just keeping track of our assets, she'd said. Our assets. Inside the guest house, I poured 2 fingers of bourbon and sat at the small desk where I kept my files. The financial documents were in the bottom drawer, underneath my tax returns and insurance policies. I pulled out the property transfer agreement, the one my lawyer had advised against signing. "Frank, you're giving away a $2 million property with no contingencies," he'd said. "At least put in some protection clauses." But Kate was my daughter, my only child, and she'd just married Brendan, who seemed successful and stable. Owner of a cybersecurity company. Impressive resume. Good family. What could go wrong? I read through the document slowly, paragraph by paragraph. Most of it was standard. Immediate transfer of ownership. No liens, no encumbrances. But there, in Section 7, subsection C, was something interesting. A clause about right of occupancy for the guest house. Lifetime right, actually. Non-revocable without my written consent. My lawyer had insisted on that one. "At least protect your housing," he'd said. I set down the document and picked up my bourbon. The ice clinked against the glass. "Wish yourself a nursing home, old man. Time to admit you're not needed here anymore. Your daughter's property." The words kept cycling through my head, each repetition tightening the knot in my chest. But underneath the hurt, underneath the humiliation, something else stirred. Something cold and analytical. The part of me that had spent 3.5 decades evaluating risk, spotting weakness, and executing strategies. I opened my laptop and typed TechVantage Solutions, Austin, Texas into the search bar. Time to find out exactly what game they were playing. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my desk, the glow of my laptop screen the only light in the dark guest house, going through everything I could find about TechVantage Solutions. Their website showed all the usual startup glossiness, sleek design, buzzwords about revolutionary AI-driven cybersecurity, team photos where everyone looked 30 and smiled too widely. Brendan's bio described him as a visionary entrepreneur who had scaled the company to new heights. The press releases talked about growth and innovation and market disruption, but something nagged at me. The pieces didn't quite fit. I thought back to Thanksgiving 6 months ago. Kate had been setting the table in the main house, my former dining room, with the chandelier I'd picked out with my wife, when she'd mentioned something about Brendan meeting with venture capitalists. "He's trying to raise $3 million for the new product," she'd said, arranging the wine glasses. "It's going to change everything." $3 million for a company that supposedly employed 85 people and had been operating for 7 years. Then there was Christmas. We'd gathered in the main house again. Me and the guest house didn't have room for hosting, and Brendan had spent most of dinner on his phone. "Investor update call," he'd explained when Kate shot him an annoyed look. "These guys are in Singapore. Different time zone." But I'd noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched when he read whatever was on his screen. That wasn't the posture of a CEO fielding routine questions. That was someone putting out fires. And just 2 weeks ago, in early March, Brendan had caught me working on my Mustang in the garage, the 3-bay garage that used to be mine, where I now occupied 1 bay while their Tesla and Kate's BMW took the other 2. He'd leaned against the workbench, watching me adjust the carburetor. "Frank, can I ask you something?" He'd tried for casual, but I'd heard the calculation underneath. "What do you think this property would appraise for? Like, if someone wanted to sell today?" I'd straightened up, wiping grease from my hands. 2.4, maybe 2.5 million. Why? Just curious. You know, financial planning. Making sure Kate and I are maximizing our assets. Our assets? Not your former property or even Kate's inheritance. Our assets. He'd walked away before I could respond, but I'd stood there in that garage, holding that greasy rag, and felt the first whisper of suspicion. Now, at 3 a.m, bourbon glass empty beside my keyboard, that whisper had become a shout. I thought about the way Kate had looked at me during dinner, not with love or even pity, with discomfort, like I was a problem to be solved, an embarrassment to be managed. When had that changed? When had my daughter stopped being the girl who used to sit in this very garage, back when it was actually my garage, and hand me tools while I worked on cars? She'd been 8 years old, maybe 9, insisting she could tell a socket wrench from a crescent wrench, getting grease on her shirt and laughing about it. "Dad, when I grow up, can I help you fix cars?" she'd asked once, her small hand wrapped around a screwdriver handle. "You can do whatever you want, sweetheart," I told her. "Just promise me you'll do it with people who treat you right." The memory felt like broken glass. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. Through the gap in the privacy hedge, I could see the main house. Dark now. Silent. Kate and Brendan must have come home while I was lost in thought. My house. My property. My 3.5 decades of work, compressed into stone and mortar, and a deed with my daughter's name on it. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Shane McDermott, private investigator. I'd referred him to a client once, back in 2019, when that client suspected his business partner was embezzling funds. Shane had uncovered everything in 3 weeks. Bank records, shell companies, forged invoices. The partner was in prison now. I typed out a text. "Shane, it's Frank Torres. Need to discuss a financial investigation. Can you call me Monday morning?" The response came back in less than a minute. "Frank, long time. I can do 9 a.m. Monday. What are we looking at?" I hesitated, my thumbs hovering over the keyboard. Then I typed, "A cybersecurity company called TechVantage Solutions. I need to know everything about their finances, debts, creditors, investors, contracts, everything." "Understood. This'll take 2-3 weeks and run about $8,500 for a comprehensive audit. That work?" I looked at the dark main house through my window, at the BMW and Tesla parked in the 3-bay garage, at the swimming pool with its expensive lighting system that Brendan had installed last summer. "That works," I typed back. "See you Monday." I set down the phone and picked up the property transfer document again. That right of occupancy clause in Section 7. Lifetime, non-revocable. At least I had time. At least they couldn't just kick me out tomorrow. But they wanted to. I was sure of it now. The nursing home joke wasn't a joke. It was a probe, testing how I'd react, seeing if I'd go quietly. I thought about my wife, gone 2 years now. Cancer. Fast and brutal. She'd made me promise there at the end that I'd take care of Kate. "She's all we have," she'd whispered. "Promise me you'll always be there for her." I'd promised, and I'd meant it. But standing in that guest house at 3:30 in the morning, bourbon wearing off and clarity settling in cold and sharp, I realized something. Taking care of Kate didn't mean letting her, and especially her husband, treat me like disposable furniture. I'd spent 35 years in investment banking. I'd structured deals worth hundreds of millions. I'd navigated the 2008 financial crisis. I'd built relationships with people who controlled real money, real power. And Brendan thought I was just some old man to be shuffled off to a nursing home. I almost smiled at that. Almost. Monday morning, I'd call Shane. Then I'd reach out to a few other contacts. Corporate lawyers, maybe Stuart Chambers, my old partner from Merrill Lynch, who'd moved to that private equity fund. What was it called? Gulfstream Capital. I sat back down at my desk and opened a fresh document on my laptop. At the top, I typed, "TechVantage Solutions, Investigation Plan." Then I started writing. Every question I needed answered. Every piece of information that mattered. Every angle I needed to explore. By the time the sun rose over Austin, turning the sky pink and gold above the main house, I had 3 pages of notes and a crystal clear understanding of what came next. They wanted me gone. They thought I was weak, helpless. Yesterday's news. Time to remind them what happened when you underestimate someone with nothing left to lose, and everything still to prove. I saved the document, shut my laptop, and went to make coffee. The Mustang in the garage needed work. That carburetor wasn't going to adjust itself, and I had calls to make on Monday. Monday morning came with that particular clarity you get after a sleepless night spent making decisions. I'd spent the weekend watching the main house through my window, cataloging patterns I'd been too polite or too blind to notice before. Saturday afternoon, Brendan had friends over for drinks by the pool. I heard them laughing, heard him say something about clearing out some dead weight, followed by more laughter. Kate was there too, in that expensive sundress she'd bought last month. She didn't laugh, but she didn't object either. Sunday, I watched them load suitcases into the Tesla. Just a quick trip to Houston, Kate had texted me. Back Tuesday. No invitation, no asking if I needed anything. Just information, delivered like you'd update a household staff member. I'd smiled at my phone. Let them go. Let them think everything was normal. Shane called me at 9 sharp Monday morning. Frank, got your message. I can start the Tech Vantage audit today. You want me to come by? Actually, I'll come to you, I said. I need to run some errands downtown anyway. The lie came easily. I didn't have errands. I had a plan forming piece by piece, like assembling an engine. Each component had to fit precisely, or the whole thing would fail. Shane's office was in a strip mall off Lamar Boulevard, modest, functional, the kind of place that didn't advertise its services. Inside it smelled like coffee and old paper. Shane himself looked like every private investigator in every movie. 50-something, tired eyes, cheap suit. But I'd seen his work before. The man was thorough. 3 weeks, you said? I asked after we'd shaken hands. For a comprehensive financial audit? Yeah. Bank records, creditor relationships, investor communications, operational expenses. You want me to dig into the CEO too? Personal finances, spending patterns? Everything. I slid an envelope across his desk. Half now, half on delivery. $8,500 total. Shane opened the envelope, counted the cash, $4,250, and nodded. You want to tell me what this is about? Business due diligence, I said smoothly. I'm considering an investment opportunity. He looked at me for a long moment, then smiled slightly. Sure you are. I'll call you when I have something. From Shane's office, I drove to downtown Austin to the Frost Bank Tower, 33 floors of glass and steel overlooking the city. I hadn't been here in 5 years, not since Stuart Chambers left Merrill Lynch to start his own fund. We'd kept in touch through holiday cards and occasional emails, but I'd been busy with my wife's illness, then her death, then letting Kate and Brendan take over my life. The elevator ride to the 28th floor felt like traveling back in time, to when I'd worn suits every day, when people asked my opinion and actually listened. When I mattered, Stuart's assistant recognized me immediately. Mr. Torres, what a surprise. Let me check if Mr. Chambers is available. He was. 2 minutes later, I was sitting across from my old partner in an office that overlooked Lady Bird Lake. Stuart had aged well, gray at the temples, but still sharp-eyed, still moving like a man who knew where he was going. Frank? He came around the desk to shake my hand, then pulled me into a brief hug. It's been too long. What brings you downtown? I settled into the leather chair across from his desk and accepted the coffee his assistant brought. Then I told him, not everything, not the nursing home comment, not the humiliation, just the facts. My daughter married to an entrepreneur, a tech company called Tech Vantage Solutions, a CEO who might be in over his head, an opportunity for someone with capital and experience to step in. Stuart leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Tech Vantage. Cybersecurity, right? I've heard the name. They've been shopping for funding. They have. I kept my voice neutral. Professional. The question is whether they're worth funding or whether they need something more structural. His eyes sharpened. A takeover. A rescue, I corrected, but one where the rescuers get controlling interest. Stuart was quiet for a moment, thinking. This was what I'd always respected about him. He didn't react impulsively. He calculated. Gulfstream doesn't usually do tech plays. We focus on mature companies, established revenue streams. What's the angle here? The angle is that the current management is running the company into the ground while pretending everything's fine. But the underlying business model is sound. Good clients, good technology, good team. Just needs competent leadership. And you know this how? I'm having it verified. Give me 3 weeks. I'll have a complete financial picture. Then we can talk about whether it's worth your time. Stuart studied me, and I could see him putting pieces together. This is your son-in-law's company, isn't it? It is. And you want to take it from him. I didn't answer immediately. Outside the window, the city spread out below us. All those buildings, all those businesses, all those people making their moves on various chessboards. Finally, I said, I want to make sure my daughter's future is secure. If that means removing her husband from a position he's mismanaging, then yes. A slow smile spread across Stuart's face. You always were a cold player when you needed to be. All right, Frank, get me the data. If the numbers work, we'll talk. We shook hands, and I left feeling lighter than I had in months. The first piece was in place. On the drive home, I called Carla Velasquez, corporate attorney, specialist in mergers and acquisitions. I'd worked with her on a deal back in 2018, and she'd been sharp enough to leave an impression. Frank Torres, she said when she picked up. This is unexpected. What can I do for you? I need a consultation on debt acquisition and conversion. Are you available this week? For you? Always. Wednesday at 2? Perfect. I hung up and drove past the main house without stopping. Through the windows, I could see the living room I'd furnished, the paintings my wife had chosen, the fireplace where we'd spent Christmas mornings with Kate when she was small. Not anymore. Now it was Brendan's showcase, his stage, his prize, for now. That evening I sat in my garage with the Mustang, working on the carburetor. The repetitive motion helped me think. Parts fitting together, systems connecting. Everything in its proper place or nothing worked. Kate and Brendan weren't back yet from Houston. The main house sat dark and empty. I could have walked right in. I still had a key, but there was no point. I wasn't looking for drama. I was looking for leverage, and Shane McDermott was going to find it for me. Wednesday afternoon, I sat across from Carla Velasquez in her office on the 8th floor of a building on Congress Avenue. She'd aged since I'd last seen her, more gray in her hair, deeper lines around her eyes, but her gaze was as sharp as ever. So, she said, fingers interlaced on her desk, debt acquisition and conversion. Walk me through what you're thinking. I laid it out carefully. A company with significant debt, multiple creditors, a potential opportunity to purchase that debt at a discount, then convert it to equity through restructuring. All perfectly legal under Texas corporate law. Carla listened without interrupting, making occasional notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she looked up. You're describing a hostile takeover. I'm describing a debt for equity swap. Motivated by personal reasons. Motivated by financial opportunity? She smiled slightly. Frank, I've done this work for 20 years. I know the difference between a business play and revenge. Which is this? I met her eyes. Does it matter? If the opportunity is real, if the numbers work, if everything's legal, does my motivation matter? She considered this, then shook her head. Not to me, but it might matter to you down the line. These things have a way of getting messy. Then your job is to make sure they don't. Fair enough. She flipped to a fresh page. Here's what you need to understand. First, you'll need to identify and approach the creditors without tipping off the debtor. That means using intermediaries, confidential communications, NDAs. Second, you'll need capital. Debt doesn't come cheap, even distressed debt. Third, the conversion process requires either voluntary cooperation from the company or a formal restructuring proceeding. If they fight, this could take months and cost a fortune in legal fees. How much capital are we talking? Depends on the debt load. What's the company worth? I'm having that evaluated now. Preliminary estimate is 5 to 6 million in valuation with 4 to 5 million in outstanding debt. Carla whistled softly. So you'd need 3 to 4 million liquid to pull this off. You have that? I can arrange it. She studied me for a long moment. You're serious about this? Completely. Then here's what we do. You get me the full financial picture when your investigator delivers. I'll review it, identify the optimal approach, and draft the necessary documents. When you're ready to move, we move fast. Creditors first, then conversion demand, then board action if we get control. The key is speed and precision. Once they know what's happening, they'll try to find countermeasures. How long from start to finish? If everything aligns, 3 to 4 months. But Frank, she leaned forward, this is going to blow up your family. You understand that? I thought about Saturday by the pool, about Sunday's casual dismissal, about Brendan's toast at my birthday dinner. It already has, I said. I'm just cleaning up the mess. Over the next 2 weeks, I fell into a routine. Mornings in the garage with the Mustang, afternoons doing research, reading everything I could find about TechVantage Solutions, studying their press releases, tracking Brendan's LinkedIn posts where he bragged about aggressive growth and revolutionary technology. Kate and Brendan came and went from the main house. Occasionally, Kate would text me, brief, obligatory messages. Hope you're doing well. Weather's nice today. The kind of messages you send to distant relatives you barely know. I responded with equal brevity. Thanks. Yes, it is. No emotion, no need. Brendan I saw rarely. A few times I spotted him getting into his Tesla, talking loudly on his phone. Once he waved at me across the yard, friendly, casual, like nothing had happened, like he hadn't publicly humiliated me 2 weeks earlier. I waved back, smiled, let him think I'd forgotten. But I was watching, always watching. I noticed he left for the office around 9:30 most days, late for a CEO who claimed to be hustling. I noticed Kate had started going to yoga 3 times a week, always in the late morning when Brendan was gone. I noticed the landscaping crew came every Thursday, and the pool maintenance guy every Tuesday, and the housekeeping service every other Friday. I noticed the Tesla had a new dent in the rear bumper, and neither of them had mentioned it. I noticed everything because I had nothing else to do except notice. On April 2nd, Shane called. Got your report ready. Can I bring it by tomorrow? Tomorrow works. Frank, he paused. This is some heavy stuff. You sure you want to know? I'm sure. All right. See you at 10. I hung up and looked out my window at the main house. Lights on in the kitchen. Kate probably making dinner. Brendan probably on his laptop at the dining room table, pretending to work. Tomorrow, I'd know exactly how deep the hole was they'd dug. And tomorrow, I'd start filling it in, on top of them. I went back to the Mustang, back to the carburetor that still needed adjusting. The work was methodical, precise, each movement deliberate. No wasted motion, just like what was coming next. The garage smelled like oil and old metal and possibility. I breathed it in and smiled. Brendan thought he'd won, thought he'd neutralized the old man, cleared the path for whatever scheme he and Kate had planned. He didn't know that the old man had spent 35 years navigating corporate warfare, had closed deals worth hundreds of millions, had made and broken careers with a signature. He didn't know that dismissing me wasn't the end of his problems. It was the beginning of mine solving them. I put down my tools and wiped my hands on a rag, then walked to the small desk in the corner where I kept my laptop, opened it, pulled up the document I'd started the night of my birthday. TechVantage Solutions' investigation plan was now 3 pages long, filled with questions and strategies and contingencies. Tomorrow, Shane would give me answers. Then I'd know exactly how to move, and once I started moving, nothing was going to stop me. Not Kate's disappointment, not Brendan's panic, not whatever legal or financial maneuvering they tried, because they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed I was finished, and I was just getting started. Shane arrived at 10 o'clock sharp on April 3rd, with a folder thick enough to use as a doorstop. He settled into the chair across from my small dining table and slid it across to me. TechVantage Solutions, he said, complete financial audit. And Frank, your son-in-law is drowning. I opened the folder. The first page was a summary, neat bullet points that told a story Brendan had been working very hard to hide. Total debt, $4,200,000. Texas Regional Bank, $1,800,000, 47 days past due. Redstone Ventures, $1,600,000. Private Equity Fund, payment delays mounting. Network Hub Inc., $820,000. Equipment supplier threatening legal action. Monthly operating expenses, $340,000. Average monthly revenue, $280,000. The math was simple, brutal, and beautiful. Brendan was spending $60,000 more every month than he was bringing in. The company was bleeding out slowly, and he was frantically applying bandages while pretending everything was fine. He's been falsifying reports, Shane said, tapping another page, showing investors growth that doesn't exist, revenue projections that are pure fantasy. He's planning a $3 million fundraising round in June for some AI platform launch. But the numbers he's showing? Fiction. I flipped through bank statements, creditor correspondence, internal memos. Shane had been thorough. Each piece of evidence was documented, sourced, verified. There's more, Shane continued. He's been using company funds for personal expenses. Not huge amounts. Smart enough to stay under the radar, but it's there. That Porsche he drives? Company lease? Those dinners at Jeffrey's and Uchi? Company card, about 47,000 in the last quarter alone. I closed the folder and looked at Shane. This is excellent work. What are you going to do with it? Buy his company, I said. Then fire him, Shane blinked. That's direct? He told me to wish for a nursing home. I'm wishing for something better. After Shane left, I scanned every page and sent the complete file to Stuart Chambers. Then I called him. Stuart, check your email. That's the TechVantage audit. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Frank, this is a disaster. How is this company still operating? Momentum and lies. But that's not our problem. Our problem is whether we can acquire the debt and convert it. Silence on the line. I could hear him thinking, calculating. 4.2 million in debt. We'd need to buy it at discount. Probably 3.8 to 4 million total. Then force conversion through restructuring. Texas law allows it if we hold majority debt position. Exactly. And once we convert, we control, what, 70-75% of the company? Depends on valuation. If TechVantage is worth 5 to 6 million, then yes, controlling stake. Frank, he paused, you're talking about hostile takeover of your son-in-law's company. I'm talking about rescuing a viable business from incompetent management, while destroying your son-in-law in the process. That's just a pleasant side effect. Stuart laughed, short and sharp. All right, but I need skin in the game from you. Real money. Gulfstream will provide the bulk, but you need to show commitment. 1.5 million. I had 2.1 million in liquid assets, stocks, bonds, cash. Giving up 1.5 million would leave me with 600,000. Not comfortable, but not destitute either. And if this worked, I'd own part of a company worth millions. Done, I said. Then we move. I'll have our attorneys start the process. Keep this quiet, Frank. The second Brendan knows someone's buying his debt, he'll try to block it. He won't know until it's too late. We hung up and I sat there in my guest house, looking at that folder Shane had delivered. 4.2 million in debt. 3 creditors who were nervous, frustrated, eager to get their money back or at least minimize their losses. And Brendan had no idea the noose was already tightening. Over the next 6 weeks, I became invisible. I didn't change my routine. Garage in the morning, errands in the afternoon, quiet evenings in the guest house. Kate texted occasionally with her usual distant politeness. Brendan waved from across the yard once or twice. Everything normal. Everything calm. But underneath, Carla Velasquez was working. On April 18th, she contacted Texas Regional Bank on behalf of a confidential client interested in acquiring distressed assets. The bank was interested immediately. 47 days overdue was 47 days of mounting risk on their books. The negotiation took 2 weeks, back and forth on price, on terms, on timing. Finally, on May 2nd, Carla called me. At $1,650,000. They're taking a $150,000 loss, but they want out. Do it. The wire transfer went through that afternoon. Suddenly, Stuart and I owned 1.8 million of Brendan's debt. He had no idea. The bank wasn't required to notify him of the sale, just that the debt still existed and payment was due. Next was Redstone Ventures. They were even more nervous than the bank. Private equity funds hate uncertainty, and Brendan's delays were making them anxious. Carla approached them with the same pitch. Confidential buyer, clean transaction, immediate payment. On May 24th, they agreed. 1,480,000. Another discount, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. By early June, Network Hub Inc. was practically begging to unload their debt. Equipment suppliers live on cash flow, and Brendan owed them $820,000 for servers and infrastructure he'd already installed. Carla offered $780,000, and they took it within 48 hours. Total investment, $3,910,000. Total debt controlled, $4,200,000. I sat in Carla's office on June 10th while she laid out the final strategy. Under Texas Business Organizations Code, we can demand immediate repayment or convert to equity through a restructuring agreement. Given TechVantage's valuation, I'm estimating $5.8 million based on assets and revenue, $4.2 million in debt converts to roughly 73% ownership. 73%, I repeated. Controlling interest. Absolute control. You and Stuart would own the company. Brendan would be a minority shareholder. When do we move? I'd recommend end of June. His fundraising deadline is approaching. He'll be desperate, distracted. We hit him when he's weakest. On June 27th, Carla Velasquez hand-delivered a formal demand letter to TechVantage Solutions. I wasn't there. I was in my garage, working on the Mustang's transmission when she called. It's done. Brendan has the letter. His sister Betsy was in the office, too. She's the CFO. Frank, you should have seen their faces. Describe them, I said, setting down my wrench. Brendan went completely white. Not pale. White, like paper. His hands started shaking when he read the amount. $4.2 million, due in full or conversion to equity. He looked at Betsy and said, "This isn't possible. These debts are spread across 3 creditors." And she said, "Not anymore, apparently." I smiled at that. What happened next? Betsy tried to negotiate, offered a payment plan, restructuring terms, anything to avoid the conversion. I told her, $4.2 million in cash by July 15th, or we convert at 73% ownership. No middle ground. And Brendan? He looked like someone had hit him with a truck. Kept saying, "Who bought our debt? Who's doing this?" I didn't tell him, obviously. Confidential client. That evening I watched the main house from my window. Lights blazed in every room. Through the gaps in the hedge I saw Brendan pacing in his home office, phone pressed to his ear. Kate passed by the window twice, looking worried. Good. Let them worry. The next few weeks were a masterclass in panic. I didn't have to imagine what was happening. I could see it. Brendan's Tesla left early every morning, came back late every night. Sometimes he didn't come home at all. Kate's yoga schedule became erratic. The perfect suburban facade was developing cracks. Through Stewart's contacts, I heard about Brendan's frantic attempts to raise capital. He approached venture funds, angel investors, even tried to get meetings with tech executives. But without positive cash flow, without clean books, with $4 million in debt hanging over the company, nobody wanted to touch TechVantage. July 15th came and went. No payment. No $4.2 million. On August 15th, the conversion agreement was finalized. Stuart Chambers called me at 11 in the morning. "It's done, Frank. As of today, Gulfstream Capital, and you own 73% of TechVantage Solutions. I'm sending over the board appointment paperwork this afternoon." I signed the documents in my guest house at my small desk, with a pen I'd received as a retirement gift from Merrill Lynch. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was now a member of the board of directors of my son-in-law's company. He still didn't know I was involved. The paperwork listed me as F. Torres, representing Gulfstream Capital Partners, anonymous enough to avoid immediate recognition. Stewart appointed a new CFO, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who'd worked with him at 2 previous companies. Her first report, delivered August 22nd, confirmed what Shane had found. Brendan was running TechVantage into the ground while funding a lifestyle he couldn't afford. Porsche lease, $2,400 monthly. Restaurant expenses, $8,000 quarterly. Business development travel that looked suspiciously like vacation, $14,000 in 6 months. The numbers didn't lie, even if Brendan did. On September 5th, I received an email from Patricia Chen. "Board meeting scheduled for today, 2 p.m. TechVantage offices. All directors required to attend." I dressed carefully that morning. Charcoal suit, white shirt, navy tie. The same outfit I'd worn to close deals worth hundreds of millions. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. For the first time in years, I looked like I mattered. The drive to TechVantage's offices took 20 minutes. The building was modern glass and steel on Congress Avenue. 12 floors. Impressive lobby. I'd never been here before. Brendan had never invited me, never showed the slightest interest in letting me see his empire. Patricia Chen met me in the lobby. "Mr. Torres, conference room is ready. Mr. Cole doesn't know you're the Gulfstream representative yet." "Good. Let's keep it that way for a few more minutes." The conference room was all windows and polished wood, with a view of downtown Austin that probably cost extra in the lease. Stewart was already there, along with 2 other board members I didn't recognize. Patricia sat at one end of the table with her laptop open. At exactly 2 o'clock, Brendan walked in. He looked terrible. Hair less perfectly styled, tie slightly loose, shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there at my birthday dinner 5 months ago. He was carrying a leather portfolio and had his confident CEO smile fixed in place, but I could see the stress underneath. He didn't look at me right away, was too focused on Stewart, trying to figure out who this new power player was. But then his eyes swept the room, hit my face, and stopped. The transformation was instant and beautiful. All color drained from his face. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. The leather portfolio slipped from his fingers and hit the table with a dull thud. He blinked once, twice, like he was seeing a hallucination. "Hello, Brendan," I said calmly. "I believe this is our first board meeting together." His eyes darted to Stewart, then to Patricia, then back to me. You're the confidential co-investor, yes. Gulfstream Capital and I now own 73% of TechVantage Solutions. I thought it was time we had a proper conversation about the company's future. Brendan's sister Betsy rushed in at that moment, slightly out of breath. She took one look at me, at Brendan's face, and her own expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something close to horror. "The birthday dinner guy," she said quietly. "You're Frank Torres." "I am. And you must be Betsy, the CFO who signed off on all those fascinating expense reports." Stewart cleared his throat. "Shall we begin? We have significant restructuring to discuss." Brendan sank into his chair like someone had cut his strings. His hands were trembling, actually trembling, as he tried to open his portfolio. Papers spilled out. A pen rolled across the table. I watched him struggle to collect everything, watched the realization sink in deeper with every passing second. He'd lost control of his company, lost it to the old man he'd mocked at a birthday dinner. The nursing home joke wasn't funny anymore. "Frank," he finally managed, his voice hoarse, we can work this out. Family, right? We're family." I smiled politely. "Family? Yes, that's an interesting word. Remember what you said at my 67th birthday? Something about nursing homes and not being needed?" His face somehow went even paler. "I'm afraid I didn't take your advice," I continued. "Instead, I bought your company for $10 million. The number wasn't quite accurate. We'd invested $3.9 million, but accuracy wasn't the point. Impact was." Brendan's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. Betsy put her hand on his arm, but he shook it off. Stewart tapped his pen on the table. "Let's discuss operational changes. Patricia, your report?" And just like that, we moved on. Brendan sat there, silent and shaking, while we discussed his company's future without him. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The board meeting ended at 3:30. Brendan left without a word, Betsy trailing behind him with her laptop clutched to her chest like armor. Through the conference room windows, I watched them huddle in the hallway, heads together, speaking in urgent whispers. Stewart gathered his papers. "That went well." "Better than I expected," I said. "He didn't even try to fight." "He will. Give him 24 hours. Right now he's in shock, but shock wears off. Then comes anger, then strategy." Stewart paused at the door. "Watch yourself, Frank. Desperate men do stupid things." I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. The Camry seemed less invisible, the traffic less oppressive. Even the guest house looked less like a cage and more like a tactical position. That evening I sat at my small desk and reviewed Patricia Chen's financial reports. The picture was even worse than Shane's audit had shown. Brendan's personal spending on company accounts totaled $47,000 in the last quarter alone. Porsche lease, $2,400 monthly. Dinners at Jeffrey's, Uchi, and Fleming's, the irony of that last one wasn't lost on me, averaged $8,000 per quarter. Business development trips to San Francisco, New York, and Miami that had produced exactly 0 new contracts. Patricia had flagged it all, sent copies to Stewart, documented everything. On August 20th, I got a text from Patricia. "Emergency all-hands meeting at TechVantage. Brendan addressing the team at 10 a.m. Thought you should know." I didn't attend. Too obvious, too early to show my hand that completely. But Patricia sent me notes afterward. Brendan had stood in front of his 85 employees and delivered a performance worthy of an Oscar. The company had secured a strategic investor, he'd said. Gulfstream Capital, a respected fund with deep pockets. Yes, they'd taken a significant equity position, but this was good news. Fresh capital, new resources, growth opportunities. Everything was temporary. Everything was under control. Trust the process. Patricia's notes included, Employees seemed nervous but willing to believe him. Betsy backed him up, showed some cherry-picked financials. No one asked hard questions. Of course they didn't. Who questions their CEO when he's promising everything will be fine? Over the next 2 weeks, I watched from a distance as Brendan scrambled. Through Patricia's reports and Stuart's updates, I tracked every move. Betsy hired a corporate attorney from Baker Botts, LLP. Expensive, prestigious, probably costing them $1,500 an hour. The attorney spent days reviewing the acquisition documents, looking for loopholes, technicalities, anything to void the deal or limit Gulfstream's control. He found nothing. Carla had been thorough. Meanwhile, Brendan kept burning through cash. The Porsche stayed. The restaurant bills continued. Patricia flagged another $6,000 in consulting fees that couldn't be traced to any actual consultants. He's either delusional or planning something, Stuart said during a call on September 3rd. Nobody spends like this when they're losing control of their company. Or he's desperate to maintain appearances, I replied. If the team sees him cutting back, they'll know something's really wrong. Either way, we need to establish operational authority. I'm scheduling a full board meeting for September 5th. Time to implement changes. September 5th arrived cool and clear, early autumn beginning to show in the trees. I dressed in my charcoal suit, again, checked my appearance in the mirror. The man looking back had changed over the past 6 months. Sharper, harder, more focused. The man who'd sat silently at his own birthday dinner while people laughed at him was gone. I arrived at TechVantage's offices at 1:45, 15 minutes early. Patricia met me in the lobby, professional as always in a navy pantsuit. Mr. Cole knows you're on the board, but I don't think he's processed that you'll actually be here. Good. Let him process it in real time. The conference room was ready. Stuart was already there, along with 2 other board members, investors who'd been brought in when Stuart took control. They nodded at me, clearly briefed on the situation. At 2 o'clock exactly, Brendan walked in. I was sitting at the head of the table, Stuart's idea, a deliberate power play, and Brendan stopped mid-stride when he saw me. For a moment, just a flash, his mask slipped. I saw raw panic in his eyes, quickly covered by forced confidence. "Frank," he said, managing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "still surprised to see you here." "I'm surprised you're surprised," I replied calmly. "I do own a significant portion of this company. Where else would I be?" He took his seat, movement stiff, controlled. Betsy entered behind him, her expression carefully neutral, but I caught the way her eyes darted around the room, assessing, calculating. Stuart opened with operational updates. Patricia presented financials, the real ones, not the sanitized versions Brendan had been showing investors. Revenue was down 8% quarter over quarter. Customer churn was increasing. 2 major contracts were at risk. And then Patricia dropped the personal expense report. These charges, she highlighted a section on the projected screen. Total $47,000 for the quarter. Porsche lease, restaurants, travel, all on company accounts, all flagged for review. Brendan's face flushed. Those are legitimate business expenses. A $2,400 monthly car lease? Patricia's tone was professional, but pointed. For a company hemorrhaging cash? I'm the CEO. I need to project success. You need to run a profitable business, I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. Success isn't a Porsche. Success is positive cash flow. Right now, you're projecting failure while driving an expensive car. Silence filled the room. Brendan stared at me, something cold and hateful flickering across his face. You're enjoying this, he said. I smiled. Brendan, remember my birthday? March 15th? You made a toast. Something about nursing homes and not being needed. You asked everyone to laugh at the old man? His jaw tightened. I just wanted to check. I leaned forward slightly. Do you still think I'm not needed? The meeting continued for another hour, but that moment was the turning point. The moment when Brendan finally, truly understood that I hadn't just bought into his company. I'd bought his company. And I was going to use that ownership to dismantle everything he'd built. As everyone filed out, I caught Brendan's eye. He held my gaze for a long second, and I saw something new there. Not panic anymore. Not shock. Rage. Cold, calculating rage. Stuart had been right. Shock was wearing off. The war was about to begin. The call came 2 days later. Kate. I was in the garage installing new brake pads on the Mustang when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer. Kate and I had barely spoken since the board meeting, just a few terse text exchanges, but something made me pick up. "You stole his company!" Her voice was shrill, furious. No hello, no preamble. "Dad, what have you done?" I set down my wrench and wiped my hands on a rag. "Kate, I didn't steal anything. I made a legal investment in a struggling business." "Don't lie to me. Brendan told me everything. You went behind his back, bought his debts, forced him out. You're trying to destroy us." The word us hit harder than I expected. Not him. Us. "Kate, your husband publicly humiliated me at my birthday dinner. He suggested I belong in a nursing home, and you sat there and let it happen. Did he mention that part?" Silence on the line. "Then, that was a joke. You're taking it too seriously." "A joke?" I kept my voice level, cold. "You think telling someone they're not needed anymore is a joke? That mocking them in front of strangers is funny? You're being dramatic. I'm being realistic. Your husband runs a company into the ground while spending company money on a Porsche and expensive dinners. He shows fake numbers to investors. He's either incompetent or dishonest, Kate. Probably both. That's not true. I have the reports. 47,000 in personal expenses last quarter alone. I can send you the documentation if you'd like." Another silence, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted from fury to something else, uncertainty. "Brendan says you're using your position to get revenge, that you're abusing your power. Brendan is trying to keep his lifestyle funded by other people's money. When that stopped working, he panicked. Now he's looking for someone to blame. He's my husband, Dad. We have a life together. You're destroying that." I closed my eyes. "Kate, I didn't choose to destroy anything. I chose to protect myself and make a sound business decision. If that affects your life, maybe you should ask why your husband put his company, and by extension your marriage, in such a vulnerable position." She hung up without another word. I stood there in the garage, phone in hand, feeling the weight of what I'd just done. Not the takeover, not the board meeting. This, losing my daughter. But then I remembered the birthday dinner, the laughter, the casual cruelty. Kate sitting there, silent, complicit. I put the phone away and went back to work on the Mustang. The next attack came from an unexpected direction. On September 10th, I got a call from Carla Velasquez. "Frank, we have a problem. Brendan's hired a PR firm. They're putting out a narrative that you're an abusive investor, using family connections for personal gain. Let me guess, he's the victim. Struggling entrepreneur, taken advantage of by his wealthy father-in-law, who manipulated the situation. They're shopping the story to tech blogs and local business press. Nothing's published yet, but they're planting seeds." I thought about that. A smear campaign could damage my reputation, make future business more difficult, but it could also backfire spectacularly if the truth came out. "What do you recommend?" "Counter-narrative. Show the receipts, his falsified reports, his personal expenses, his mismanagement. Make this about a failing CEO, not a family vendetta." "That airs a lot of dirty laundry." "Yes, but if he's going public, you need to be ready to respond. Otherwise, his version becomes the default story." I hung up and called Patricia Chen. "I need something from you. Every piece of documentation on Brendan's financial misconduct. Falsified investor reports, personal expenses on company accounts, everything. Can you compile it?" "Already done. I saw this coming. I'll send it over within the hour." The file Patricia sent was devastating. Side-by-side comparisons of what Brendan told investors versus actual revenue. Detailed breakdowns of personal charges. Screenshots of emails where he instructed Betsy to massage the numbers for presentations. I forwarded everything to Carla with a single message. "Hold this in reserve. If his PR campaign goes public, we respond immediately." On September 15th, a small tech blog published a piece. "Austin CEO claims family betrayal in investment deal." The article was sympathetic to Brendan, painting him as a visionary brought down by a vindictive relative. It quoted an anonymous source saying I'd used unethical tactics to seize control of TechVantage. Carla called me within minutes. "Do we respond?" I thought about the birthday dinner, about Brendan's smug face, about Kate's silent complicity. "Yes, send everything to the same blog, along with a statement. Make it clear this isn't about family. It's about accountability. The blog published a follow-up 2 days later. TechVantage CEO under fire for financial mismanagement. The article included Patricia's documents, the falsified reports, the personal expenses. It quoted me saying, "Good businesses deserve good leadership. When leadership fails, investors have a responsibility to act." The response was immediate. 2 board members who'd been fence-sitting suddenly supported Stewart's proposal for operational changes. A major client who'd been considering leaving decided to stay, reassured that new management was coming. And Brendan went silent. No more PR campaigns. No more public statements. Just radio silence from the main house, where the lights burned late into the night. On September 20th, Stewart called. Brendan's attorney reached out. They want to negotiate a settlement. He'll step down as CEO voluntarily in exchange for keeping a board seat and consulting role. No. Frank, no consulting role. No board seat. He leaves completely, or we vote him out at the next board meeting and he leaves with nothing. His choice. Stewart was quiet for a moment. You're not leaving him any room to save face. He didn't leave me any room at my birthday dinner. Why should I be more generous? Another pause. Then, all right, I'll deliver the message. 2 hours later, Stewart called back. He accepted. He'll resign as CEO effective October 1st. Clean break, no consulting agreement, no board position. He keeps his equity stake, but that's it. I should have felt victorious. I'd won. Completely, totally won. But all I felt was tired. That evening, I sat in my guest house and looked out at the main house. Lights on in every room. Kate's car in the driveway. She'd come home early from somewhere. I wondered if she knew yet, if Brendan had told her he was stepping down, if she understood that her father, the old man she'd watched get humiliated at his own birthday, had just systematically dismantled her husband's entire professional life. My phone buzzed. A text from Kate. "I hope you're satisfied." I stared at those 5 words for a long time. Then I typed back, "I hope you're safe. That's all I've ever wanted." She didn't respond. I set the phone down and walked out to the garage. The Mustang was almost finished. Just a few more adjustments, some final detailing, and it would be ready to drive. 67 years old, and I was rebuilding engines and corporations with equal precision. Maybe I wasn't needed in a nursing home after all. October 9th arrived with perfect autumn clarity, the kind of day when Austin's sky turns that particular shade of blue that makes you glad to be alive. I put on my best suit, navy blue, tailored, the one I'd worn to close my biggest deals at Merrill Lynch. The man in the mirror looked ready. Not angry, not vengeful. Just ready. Stewart called at 8 in the morning. "You sure about this, Frank? We could handle the transition privately. Board vote, press release, done." "I'm sure. He wanted a show. Let's give him one." The Austin Convention Center was impressive. All glass and modern architecture, built for exactly this kind of corporate event. By the time I arrived at 9:30, TechVantage's team was already setting up. Stage, lights, massive screens showing the Sentinel Core logo. Brendan had spared no expense. Company money he didn't really control anymore. But he didn't seem to care about details like that. I found my seat in the front row. Stewart sat beside me, along with Patricia Chen and 2 other board members. We looked like what we were, the people who actually ran TechVantage now. The auditorium filled quickly. Investors in expensive suits, clients looking cautiously optimistic, press with their cameras and recorders, and TechVantage's 85 employees scattered throughout the rows whispering nervously. They knew something was wrong with the company, even if they didn't know exactly what. At 10 o'clock sharp, the lights dimmed. The screens lit up with promotional footage. Sleek shots of servers, code scrolling, satisfied customers. Background music swelled. Very dramatic. Very Brendan. Then he walked onto the stage. I had to admit, the man knew how to make an entrance. Custom suit that probably cost $3,000. Perfectly styled hair. That confident smile that had fooled so many people for so long. He looked like success. Like confidence. Like someone who had everything under control. If you didn't know, he'd lost his company 6 weeks ago. "Good morning," his voice boomed through the speakers. "Thank you all for being here. Today is a historic day for TechVantage Solutions. Today we launch the future of cybersecurity." The presentation was good, professional. Brendan walked through Sentinel Core's features: AI-driven threat detection, real-time response protocols, integration with existing security infrastructure. He showed client testimonials, market projections, revenue forecasts that were probably as fictional as the ones he'd shown previous investors, but his delivery was flawless, charismatic, compelling. I watched people in the audience lean forward, interested, convinced. This was why Brendan had succeeded for so long. Not because he was competent, but because he could sell. He could make you believe. The presentation lasted 45 minutes. When it ended, applause filled the auditorium. Brendan beamed, soaking it in, his moment of triumph. "Now," he said as the applause died down, "I'd like to open the floor to questions. We have representatives from our investor group here, our client base, and of course our incredible team." He gestured expansively at the audience. "Who has the first question?" I raised my hand. Brendan's eyes found me in the front row. For just a second, less than a second, his smile faltered. Then it was back, wider than before. "Frank, my father-in-law, everyone. Part of our extended TechVantage family." A few scattered chuckles. He was playing it off as a joke, a surprise. Look at the quirky family dynamics. I stood up slowly, took my time, let the moment build. The auditorium went quiet. "Brendan," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the silence, "that was an impressive presentation. Truly impressive. The product looks solid. The market analysis is compelling. You've built something with real potential here." He relaxed slightly, nodded. "Thank you, Frank. We've worked very hard. Which makes it such a shame," I continued, "that you nearly destroyed it with incompetent management and financial fraud." The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Brendan's smile froze. "I'm sorry, what?" "I have a question for you," I said. "But first, let me introduce myself properly. I'm Frank Torres, representing Gulfstream Capital. As of August 15th, Gulfstream and I own 73% of TechVantage Solutions. We are the majority shareholders. And as of this morning, the board of directors, which I sit on, has made a decision regarding the company's leadership." Brendan's face had gone the color of old concrete. Behind him on the massive screens, his confident smile from the presentation still beamed down at everyone. The contrast was beautiful. "The board has determined," I continued, speaking clearly so everyone could hear, "that TechVantage requires new leadership to move forward. Leadership that doesn't falsify reports for investors. Leadership that doesn't spend $47,000 in company money on personal expenses every quarter. Leadership that actually knows how to run a profitable business." Murmurs rippled through the audience. I saw heads turning, people whispering. Brendan stood frozen on stage, mouth slightly open. "Therefore," I said, "I'm here to inform you, Brendan Cole, that effective immediately, you are terminated as CEO of TechVantage Solutions. The board thanks you for your contributions and wishes you well in your future endeavors." The murmurs became a roar. Cameras swung toward the stage, toward me, capturing everything. Brendan staggered backward 1 step, 2 steps. His hand went to his chest. His face had gone from gray to white to something approaching green. "You can't," his voice cracked. "This is my company." "No," I said simply, "it's not." He tried to speak again. His mouth opened, closed, his legs buckled, and he grabbed the podium for support. Then his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. The auditorium erupted. People rushed toward the stage. Someone shouted for a doctor. Cameras recorded every second of Brendan's humiliation, broadcast live to anyone watching the stream. I sat down calmly and turned to Stewart. "I think that went well." They revived Brendan in less than a minute. "Just shock," the medic said. "No real damage except to his pride and his career." By the time they helped him off the stage, the auditorium was mostly empty. Journalists rushing to file stories, investors making phone calls, employees clustered in worried groups, wondering what happened next. I stayed in my seat, watching it all unfold. Patricia Chen appeared at my elbow. "We need to address the team. Reassure them about their jobs." "Stewart can handle that. I've done enough for today." She smiled slightly. "You enjoyed that." "More than I probably should have." Stewart gave a brief speech. 5 minutes, professional, calm. The company was in good hands. Operations would continue. A new CEO would be announced within the week. Anyone with questions could contact HR. I found out later that Stewart had already secured Marcus Webb, a former IBM executive with 20 years of experience, to take over as CEO. Marcus started on October 15th. Within a month, he'd cleaned up the financial mess, renegotiated contracts, and started turning TechVantage profitable. But that came later. On October 9th, I simply walked out of the convention center, got in my Camry, and drove home. The main house was dark when I arrived. Kate and Brendan were probably still dealing with the aftermath. I didn't call, didn't text. Just went to my guest house and changed into work clothes. The Mustang was almost done. Just the final detailing left. 2 days later, Kate called. Her voice was quiet, tired. "Dad, can I come over?" She arrived 20 minutes later, without Brendan, sat in my small living room and cried for 30 minutes without saying a word. I made tea. Waited. "He used me," she finally said. "Used both of us. The house, the lifestyle, everything. It was never about building a life together. It was about having access to your money, your property, your connections." "I know. And I let him. I saw you hurting at that birthday dinner, and I let him humiliate you because I wanted to believe he was right, that you were just in the way." I set down my tea. "Kate, do you want me to say it's okay? Because it's not. You hurt me. Badly. But you're still my daughter, and I still love you. Those two things can both be true." She wiped her eyes. "I filed for divorce yesterday. I'm moving into an apartment downtown next week. I need to figure out who I am without him." "Good. That's good." She stayed for another hour. We didn't talk much more. Just sat together in the way family does when words aren't enough. When she left, she hugged me at the door. "I'm sorry, Dad." "I know. We'll figure it out." Betsy Cole resigned from TechVantage on October 20th. I heard through Patricia that she found work at a startup in Dallas. No hard feelings. She'd been loyal to her brother, and I couldn't fault that. Brendan tried to sue. Of course he did. Hired a lawyer who filed a complaint alleging fraud, manipulation, undue influence. Every accusation bounced off the wall of documentation Carla had assembled. The lawyer withdrew the case 3 weeks later, probably after explaining to Brendan what frivolous lawsuit meant. In late November, Stewart called with an offer. "Gulfstream wants to buy out your stake. 1,900,000. That's 400,000 profit after your investment." I thought about it for maybe 10 seconds. Done. The paperwork took a week. On November 27th, I signed over my shares to Gulfstream, transferred the funds to my account, and walked away from TechVantage Solutions forever. $400,000. Not bad for 7 months of work. But more importantly, my dignity back, my self-respect restored. The knowledge that underestimating a 67-year-old man was a very expensive mistake. The Mustang was finished by December 1st. I spent a Saturday afternoon polishing every surface until it gleamed. The 67 had been a wreck when I'd started. Rusted, broken, forgotten. Now it looked like it had just rolled off the assembly line. Like me, it had been restored. On December 7th, I drove it downtown, just for the pleasure of driving, of feeling the engine respond, of being in control of something powerful and beautiful. I happened to pass TechVantage's building on Congress Avenue. Happened to see a familiar figure on the sidewalk outside, carrying a cardboard box. Brendan looked smaller somehow, older. He was loading the box into a beat-up Honda. The Porsche was gone, of course, along with everything else. He glanced up as I drove past. Our eyes met for just a moment. I didn't honk, didn't wave, didn't slow down. Just drove past, the Mustang's engine purring smoothly, and continued downtown toward the future. In my rearview mirror, I saw him standing there, watching me go, still holding that box, still trying to figure out what happened. I smiled. 7 months ago, Brendan had told me to wish for a nursing home, had called me irrelevant, had tried to erase me from my own life. Instead, I'd bought his company, fired him in front of everyone who mattered, and walked away $400,000 richer. The old man wasn't quite ready for retirement after all. I turned the corner and left him behind, just another piece of the past I'd dealt with and moved beyond. The Mustang accelerated smoothly, the December sun warm on my face, and Austin spread out ahead of me with all its possibilities. 67 years old, and I'd never felt more alive. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left